Hello. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming here on this hot afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here at the Museum of Goa. I would like to thank the Museum of Goa team and the curator for today, Nilankur Das. Thank you so much for having me here. So, firstly, before I begin my talk, or rather a conversation on something that's so visible to us these days, right? As we drive through, or even on your way to the Museum of Goa today, you might have noticed so much of construction happening around us. It's a visible impact that is happening today in Goa. So before I begin, I just wanted to thank a few people who have been really important and who contributed so much to my thought process over the past few months as I was developing this research. Firstly, my guide, architect Fernando Velio, will be joining us shortly, but he's a professor at Goa College of Architecture and CEPT University, Ahmedabad. Professor Edgar Ribeiro, who's sitting with us here today. He's the ex-Chief Town Planner of India and also a resident of Soccor. So I was glad, he was very kind to accommodate me on many Sundays over at his house along with his very kind wife, Auntie Flavia. And architect Dean De Cruz, who's also here with us. So has also been quite an inspiration rather from all the work he does as an architect today in Goa. And last but not the least, my grandparents who nurtured my thought process, and my grandmother who I'm named after. So yes, coming back to the topic of today, is Goa changing? So, like I spoke about, right, the visible change. To the left, you see an old Goan vernacular Indo-Portuguese house, as we term it today. And to the right, you can notice a lot of construction. Now, there can be two ways to look at this. We are trying to accommodate more people today in the village, or are we trying to overburden our villages? A little bit about Soccor, the village. That is the case for today. So Soccor is a part of the Bardes Taluka, which is in North Goa. It is about 20 minutes from where we are sitting right now. It is also part of the old conquest. So when the Portuguese ruled Goa, these were their main territories back in the day. If you notice, even today, with regard to development in Goa, a lot of your excessive development is happening in the old conquests. So, if we go back to around 100 years ago, the plotting of the village. So when we look at the plotting, just how your village plot is formed, the older villages had a linear plot, a rectangular plot, with one edge that greeted the road and the other edge that either greeted the fields or the hills. So if you look at the village of Soccor as a whole, it's mostly a lot of greenery. It's a lot of fields, a lot of hills. And this goes back to the comunidad, the Sarula. So if you know, it is an age-old system where land was owned by the community. Comunidad, translation from Portuguese to English, is community. And today, in 2026, out of 100% of the land owning in the village of Soccor, around 40% still is in the hands of the comunidad. So whatever is marked in the darker red is the fields of the village, and the other aspect, which is a slightly lighter shade rather, are the hills. If any of you all come for bird watching to the Soccor plateau, or if you come there for walks, that is also a part of the comunidad land. So like I was speaking about, the plotting in Soccor, it was always linear, and this is a slightly graphical way to show you how the house, the edge, and how it still respected its greenery. And now it comes to ownership. Of course, equality was not prevalent in the Goan villages. It has always been something that only a few families maybe held a lot of land. The other families were either the Munkards or they worked for them. But at the same time, coming to the ownership, the plot size was usually on an average 1,750 to 2,000. Of course, there are people who own 18,000 square meters, 36,000 square meters till today. But this was the average size of the plot. And this is a collage of all the houses prevalent in the village. that were built in that era. A little bit characteristics about a Goan home that I'd like to share with you today. Firstly, if you notice, a house built in that era, its scale is just the ground floor, or maybe in some cases you'll have a ground plus one. Secondly, it is climate responsive. Now, if I break it down a little bit, climate responsive is respecting how the building reacts to the climate. For example, you notice it had sloping roofs, whereas today you may see a lot of structures, they have flat slabs and then you have waterproofing issues and all, right? So these are the few rather old knowledge that was always transpired through all these structures built. Now, when we now look at today's times rather, we spoke about how the Portuguese conquests were certain talukas, and now you'll notice a certain trend. This is from a study done by Dr. Solano da Silva, and it speaks about how urbanization is happening in these certain pockets in a higher rate compared to the other parts of Goa. And we zoom into the taluka of Bardez in specific, and you'll see how it has increased so much in the past 10 years in specific. Now all these show us a very interesting pattern of how things are going about. Firstly, one of the main things that have hit the real estate market is land speculation. So if you look at a study here, back in 2000, per square meter was 800 rupees. In 1913, this is again through sitting with elderly people, in 1913, around 2000 square meters was 50 rupees. And today in 2000 it's 800, but let's move to where we are today. In 2026, it's at 42,500 rupees per square meter in Soccor. You can see that it is a post-COVID acceleration where the need or the rather feel to come to Goa has increased so much due to the other issues in the other urban parts of India. But at the same time, I understand how, you have so many issues happening in Delhi, in Bangalore, in Bombay, but Goa is becoming this filter for people to come down, and it is definitely creating this huge demand, but the supply is limited. In terms of settlement land, Goa's land is just going to be X, it will never increase. Hence, we now need to operate in another fashion to accommodate the income of people, right? So we are now having a new wave of architecture, new wave of design coming in. That is a vertical sense of providing to people. So you now have so many buildings come around the same village. So you remember the collage I showed last time versus the collage I showed this time. It's such a stark contrast. A lot of these projects are proposed from 2015 onwards. Some of these are complete, some of these are still in construction, but this is just a collage of 16 projects. Today in Soccor, as per the RERA website, there are more than 70 projects under construction. Coming back to it, this is the building footprint today, 2025, where you must have seen the previous map which I showed about the plotting. Everything here marked in black are the building footprints now, which are definitely soon going to increase. Now you must have seen these hoardings, right? Field view, sea view, land view. Now we can look at the secular growth along our fields here. And soon you can even see it greeting our hills rather. This entire area. This area here is the Soccor plateau. But soon we're starting to have development also in this edge so that they get the field view from the higher part of the land rather. So there's this very interesting phenomena. Not a phenomena, but rather a way to tackle how to build higher on land, right? So like we spoke about before, each plot of land that was owned by somebody was always on an average 1,250 square meters. But suppose somebody wants to build higher, they need to follow the Goa bylaws where you need a minimum setback if you want to build much higher, right? So a new solution to this has come into it is that we amalgamate plots. Now plot amalgamation changes the nature of the village. Here now, each plot was divided in that era in such a way that each plot accommodates one home. Now when you amalgamate it, you can occupy so many more homes. And you can even go higher. With an FAR of 16 Soccor, they can go higher. And this is just one case of plot amalgamation. And now let's go to the current. Firstly, this is one particular case I got again from RERA where a plot was amalgamated. And post that, this is Soccor today. Every every area, every plot marked in red are amalgamated plots. And there are so many more. This is just a small picture of it that I could, revive or get through. So now all these issues of plotting, of amalgamation of plots, of building excessively, has led to a huge divide in so many things you might have not noticed, but something that is definitely felt rather. How many of you from here live in a village? Can you please raise your hands up? And how many of you still use the water from your well? Okay, so now I saw 50% hands go down, right? But all this has started, I'm very sure, in the past 5 years, right? That you've stopped rather using the water from your well. And have you seen this also come up in our villages? Swimming pools all over. I have nothing against swimming. I myself have been a swimmer for Goa for 13 years competitively. I love swimming. But at the same time, when we swam, it was in the public pools in Kampal or in Pere to train. But now, our swimming pools have become private entities. It's not the pool that's the issue, it's the water inside that is privatized. That is the issue. So, if you notice, today in Goa, even as per the last proceedings in the Assembly in July 2025 actually, the Chief Minister in his statement also agreed that Goa is at a deficit today of 60 million litres every day. So if you multiply it by the year and everything, it gets quite high. But then I did a study of all the swimming pools present today in Soccor itself. And there are 40 swimming pools. And now if you calculate the amount of water needed for these swimming pools to even just stay there, it's around 6.7 million litres of water annually. If they're taking care of their pool, that means they're changing their water regularly. Or maybe some of them have a waterfall and then there are so many more added amenities, which of course spike this so much high, right? And I'm not even speaking about the water needed for construction. This is just to operate. And now, with the onset of swimming pools, you have this water being discharged after it's used. It's chlorinated, right? You can't use it for anything. Either they're mindful of recycling it or it's left into the fields. And that is another thing that happens quite often now. That's what the farmers have mentioned. That a lot of their fields are receiving chlorinated water that is also intoxicated with other chemicals. Another thing you'll notice quite deeply is the change in the scale of the village. So now when you traverse usually in the village, you don't feel small, right? Now think of yourself entering a hyper-luxurious mall in maybe South Bombay versus you entering the Mall de Goa. Where do you really feel small? You must be feeling small in that particular mall because of the scale of it, right? Not that Mall de Goa is small, but I'm just giving you two direct things to imagine. Now think of yourself walking through maybe high-tech city in Hyderabad with so many buildings around you, and you walking in the village of Soccor or Saligaon or Pelen. You feel much more grounded, right? It's because of the structures around you that are also inconsiderate to your perspective. It is matching your sense of understanding. But today, we have the vertical densification happening. You have very interesting names given, acacia greens, something blues, like very fancy terms that just give you the feeling of living in a hyper luxury space. But you don't understand the impact that it has on your neighbor, on the passerby, on anyone on the road. The scale, again, now look at this particular drawing. There's an issue, I think, with this, which is not really clear. But anyways, you can see the house, the scale, just ground floor. And then you have your building that is ground +2, ground +3. If they're not agreeing to bylaws, they're going ground +4. Now it brings us to one very critical aspect, that is the electricity consumption of the villages. Very lately you must have read the papers where now it's promised to study the carrying capacity of the village. What is carrying capacity? Carrying capacity is studying firstly the resource consumption in the village, whether our villages are fit to accommodate so many people coming in. And we are a borrowing state as far as amenities like electricity is concerned. We have 2 lines coming in from Maharashtra and Karnataka. And I did a small study on an electricity bill rather. I have the bills with me if you want to cross-verify later. So these are 2 particular projects. One is an old house that was built in 1913. I've taken a ground +1 house just to suit the other case I was taking. The other is a ground +3 structure. Ground +2, sorry. So the bill in the old house is 1,777 for the same particular month. And just in one of the 2 BHK units, it was 1,200 rupees. Now you'll ask me, so what's the problem? It's lesser than the house, right? But the area of that house is 420 square meters. And the area of the 2 BHK is 95 square meters. So the house is so much more bigger than the apartment, right? And this is just a 2 BHK unit. And the house is on a particular land of about 1,200 square meters. And now this apartment building, we need to still consider that it is just 1 unit in the entire building. So I went and multiplied all the apartment bills of that unit, of that particular building. And that came down to 20,000 per month. So in that same specific area, one house bill was 1,777, and in a similar footprint, not even similar footprint, but let's take that as a case, it's 20,250. So you can understand the amount of load that vertical densification causes on our villages, on the carrying capacity of the village, and then even the materiality, right? The old houses usually seldom have air conditioners, even if they do, it's seldom used because of the laterite, the lime plaster, the way it was designed. Whereas our new structures all need an air conditioner in each room. If you're rich enough, you also have it in your kitchen in the summers, because that is the state of affairs today, right? This brings me to one of the points that really stayed with me rather. It is the onset of informal settlements in our villages. So when one thinks of informal settlements, it is Dharavi in Bombay, Asia's largest slum. Maybe somebody thinks of Chimbel in some sense as informal. But do you realize that even Soccor now has its own set of informal settlements growing? And this informal settlement is a direct byproduct, or rather it's a direct intervention. So many words to say, right? It's basically directly proportional to the amount of the new gated communities that we're getting. Because in informal settlements, you have your cooks, you have your maids, you have your drivers who reside, and they can't afford our 45,000 per square meter land rate, right? So they need to find the house somewhere or the other. And it is now anywhere, it's built anywhere. On Comunidad land, it is built on land that is not theirs. In the current situation, the exclusive communities and the gated communities are coming over land that was privately owned, and now the Comunidad land is absorbing all these informal settlements. That is the sort of land ownership we have in the village, these 2 major parties. And so I went to Ramnagar. It is just opposite Mall de Goa. You just have to drive in a little bit, 2 minutes, and you reach there. you'll notice that there is a great emergence of this housing sector, these housing sectors, people's homes. It is 350 meters long. It is around 5,000 square meters, and it's been on for the past 30 years. It is all on comunidad land. This is some schematic drawings of the place, but this is how dense, if you look at the elevation on top, it's all dense housing. And most of them, they either work in the mall, they work in PDA colony, they work in so many other homes around the place. They drive down to homes in Peña de France, which is again all in a radius of 10 minutes from that spot. Their livelihood there is, if you compare it to Dharavi, I'm not going to say it's the same, but it is almost getting there. Because of the lack of open space, so many new children who are born there, and drainage, sanitation problems, so much. So this is the impact that we don't think otherwise, but this is the impact that's happening. In a counter to rather housing for the poor, the government of India had come up with the 20-point program. So the 20-point program is situated in Porvari as well, in Soccor rather, and this is what it was when it was imagined in the 1980s. You can just keep your eyeballs on that particular map there. And now there's also a certain increase of the housing there illegally. Of course, now as populations increase, everybody needs much more space to reside in. And there's a certain identity that is created in that place that anyone can come now, place their houses. They're pakka houses, they're not kacha houses anymore. And again, all the people who work there, the ladies, the men, they're all doing daily chores in the vicinity, again, in a radius of 10 minutes. This is a visible barrier. Usually we look at the satellite images and see the stark difference between Ambani's house and maybe a Dharavi. But this is what is happening in Goa as well today. There's a visible barrier of our gated communities who are much more comfortable and the people who work for them. This is rather an interview with one of the caretakers who's come down to Goa from Nepal. And he's been trying to find a home. He tried to find a home for a week. And then he agreed to stay anywhere that he got. So he found a room that someone had with nothing. It's just a plain room. He spends his entire day here, his entire night here, and then he gets back to work in the morning. Now, all these areas wouldn't classify as livable in terms of the basic human right that somebody has today. But this is happening in Goa, where we consider ourselves to be a developed state, with higher education, etc., etc. So, on the pretext of having gated communities and exclusive residences in our villages, it is having so many more domino effects on the other parameters of how our villages usually ran. So you have the architectural character of the village that is now changed, the demography, the type of people, the population, and you know what happens when there's a demographic shift, right? It impacts many things like elections. That is again a prime thing to even run our state and run our country. Elections are hampered, so many other major factors are hampered. Resource consumption of the village, like we spoke about, the electricity, the water. We've not spoken about cutting of trees and all yet, but that's also of course there. The scale of the village. Now when you drive down any of these bylanes, you'll feel small. And it's not also the question of feeling small, it's just the question of what are we designing our villages to be like, or what are we even agreeing to have our villages like. Because all this impacts our quality of life in not only the village, but in Goa in general. So some of the key findings from this study was that these exclusive enclaves have definitely reshaped the peri-urban morphology of Goa. Of course, through the amalgamation of plots, the controlled access. You're not allowed to enter any of these gated communities, right? Are you? But if you ask your mom or dad who lived in villages, they accessed every point of the village, unless it was maybe the graveyard that they were not permitted to. But otherwise, every spot in the village was accessible by everyone. But there's a lot of controlled access now in all the areas where all these developments are happening. Then the low income group settlements have spiked. Now this also brings in the question of safety, because all these people, like I said, are not legally living on these lands. So there's no accountability. So in case someone creates a crime, they can just flee away. There's zero accountability. And now the segregation of wealth is so much more dominant. So back in the day, like I started off, not that the villages were equal. You did have bifurcation in terms of people, right from the caste system to your Badkar, Munkar, to who has more land. But at the same time, today, instead of it improving, it has just somersaulted and become another issue altogether. So today, high value of land leads to displacement of locals, because today a local can't afford the land there. So this becomes a place for capital from outside the state to park into our villages. So as long as land speculation continues, you and I hopefully you can afford it, but I'm sure not going to be able to afford this inflation of rates in the same village. And definitely it's going to contribute to a rise of so many more informal settlements. And this brings us to the last point, that is something we need to solve going ahead, is the fact of the matter being the lack of affordable housing in Goa today. So with the onset of this paradox of housing emerging in not only Soccor, in any part of Goa today, there needs to be the third venture coming in, that is affordable housing for the many locals, for the many middle class, lower middle class, etc. Thank you. That's my question. Thank you so much.